Saudi Arabia at the end of the 1980s. The sheikh of a nomadic Bedouin tribe parks his car in one of Riyadh's surviving old quarters. Only a few years ago, this same sheikh used to arrive here with his camel caravan, and he would leave the animals for safekeeping in this same place. In the past, the sheikh would go to pay his respects to his prince. Today, he has an appointment in the internal affairs offices of this modern government building. The old Riyadh is disappearing. The city of the Saudi kings was a point of reference for all the nomad tribes. Here they stored their merchandise and their supplies. Even the oases in today's Saudi Arabia are changing. The oases, havens of water and shade, where the nomads would find among towering palm trees refreshing natural pools. The oases, those tranquil meeting places sung by the poets of this simple ancient world. There are now pools of water everywhere in the changing desert. Reservoirs like this are found in the new oases and are created artificially with the aid of plastics. Suddenly, time is moving at a dizzying speed. Nowadays, a young nomad finds it more convenient to work as a specialized laborer rather than wander through the dunes in search of a sparse pasture for his flock. The route we have planned will take us far beyond these dunes as we set out to record on film the death throes of the thousands of years old world of the Bedouin nomads. We are on the outskirts of the small town of Hofuf. Here, the government is offering permanent homes to nomads who agree to settle down, to join an urban community and forsake the life of wandering tent people. But the tent is part of their lives, and those families that accept permanent homes found it impossible to give up this fundamental asset traditionally made from woven camel hair. And so, urbanized nomads try to live with two contrasting realities. And it is this contrast that causes rifts in the basic element of Arab nomad society, the family. In spite of the transformation in progress, it is still the women who take care of the home, whatever form it may take. The men receive social assistance and benefit payments if they are not employed in the oil fields. Once wandering shepherds, they are now permanent layabouts. And even in remote places like this, the traditional lifestyle of the men of the desert has become a thing of the past. This social pollution astonished and dismayed us. The camel used to be the nomad's faithful traveling companion. But the city nomads have no more use for it. This animal is a mobile decoration for a popular cafe in Hammamet. Camels and nomads. Horses and nomads. Different steeds for very different ethnic groups. The horse was preferred by the nomad tribes once feared as raiders and plunderers. This proud Moroccan tribe is an example. Finding the real desert means venturing into burning, hot, hostile areas. Like this harsh landscape among the desolate mountain chains of the Sinai Desert, where the extreme northern tip of Africa meets the Middle East. Here, we found traces of an ancient nomadic civilization. That same civilization and the Sinai Desert are mentioned several times in the Bible. Genesis chapter 46, verse 32. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. They have been keepers of cattle from their youth, both they and their fathers. And in search of water, they will wander with their tents in the land of Goshen. The fleeting presence of wandering shepherds was noticed in these same mountains by the Jews as they fled from Egypt. It was on this peak, the highest in the Sinai, that Moses received the 10 Commandments from God. At the foot of the mountain that is sacred for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, there is a sanctuary. Pilgrims in ancient times built a simple stone altar here. Then in the early Middle Ages, when the pilgrims grew in number, a wall was built to protect the holy place. The area within the wall, dedicated to St. Catherine, is an oasis protected from the wind. The land has always been worked by Coptic monks, who offer nomads and pilgrims their produce and a place in the shade. St. Catherine of Sinai, a reference point for pilgrims, for tourists whose numbers increase every year, and for nomads whose numbers grow smaller by the year. The descendants of tribes that used to raid this place, in spite of the monastery's impressive fortifications, visit the site today with intentions quite different from those of their plundering forefathers. In association with the monks, they offer a transportation service for tourists who wish to continue on up the mountain, retracing Moses' steps to visit the sacred peak. A day's journey from Mount Sinai, there is another holy place hidden away in a remote valley. This tomb of a marabut, a Muslim holy man, is of particular importance for the Sinai nomads. In fact, these desert nomads, who have certainly not created cemeteries elsewhere, like to be laid to rest in the shadow of this tomb when they die, so that they can be close to the marabut who is buried here and who was one of them. For this reason, the custodian of the tomb and of the cemetery is a nomad holy man who has renounced his migratory traditions for a sedentary life of prayer. We leave the Sinai behind us as we continue our expedition. After thousands of miles of rock, sand, and inhospitable terrain, we reach the most remote extremities of the desert that lies along the frontiers of Southeast Asia. We have crossed the barren wastes of Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan to reach the Thar Desert, a dusty, almost uninhabited stone world that is still traversed by caravans of the surviving Pashtun nomads. We fall in behind. Both the men and the women are armed. The camels are laden with goods. But this caravan is not heading for a marketplace, and it is not a raiding party. Its goal is, in fact, a sacred place revered by this ethnic group, the tomb of a Pashtun holy man. one we visited in the Sinai, the tomb of this holy man is a fixed reference point for people who live a migratory life. The intensity of these people's devotion is very similar to that of the more orthodox creed followed by Arab and Sinai nomads. And both beliefs are equally sincere and alive. For nomadic peoples still faithful to the traditions of their roots, religious belief is not only very much alive, it is a basic tenet common to all nomad groups, regardless of ethnic differences, from one end to the other of a far-flung desert world that's from Asia to Africa. In certain desert areas in Africa, social and economic changes have turned some villages into ghost towns. This was once a marketplace, a depository for goods and merchandise in Zoum Tatahuin. Until a few years ago, the town was an important supply station for caravans crossing the Sahara. If something or someone is still faithful to the nomad's traditional way of life, this is due to the strong religious beliefs of the desert men, especially those to be found in the South Sahara along the border with Mali. Here, little has changed since the first days of Islam. Holy towns like Mopti, Djenné, and in this case, Nando, are still terminal points both for individual believers scattered across the desert and for caravans that fulfill regional trade demands. Nomad groups still frequent these holy towns to regenerate the spirit of their beliefs and to conduct trade. Great mosques built of mud bricks, the cheapest of all construction materials, ennobled by the beauty of this unusual architectural style, dominate the South Saharan city of Djenné, a prosperous religious center. In this area, the most important holy cities are also thriving trading centers. A large crowd of believers and pilgrims can always be found around the mosques. Here, goods carried by nomads across the southern Sahara are traded for merchandise that arrives by river from West Africa. The most valuable commodity to reach this market from the desert is salt. Rock salt. The people of the Sahara have been mining it for many, many generations and shipping it by caravan to markets in the south. Salt is responsible for tracing what is probably the oldest trading route across the world's greatest desert. We decided to use a helicopter to discover what remains of that ancient trail. When nomads talk about the most desolate desert of all deserts, they are referring to the region of Tenere, where the sands of the Sahara lie beneath a blinding white veneer of rock salt. From the innermost heart of the Sahara, the caravaneers of the nomadic group, the Adzalai, set out on their long journey. The salt caravan takes its name from them. This caravan will need 6 weeks to reach markets that are several hundred miles away. Kaletigui Mariko, the national poet of Mali, lived with the nomad traders and drew inspiration from their dialect. He sings about the hard work and difficulties endured on every journey, the nomad's odyssey from dune to dune, from campsite to campsite. This is a rough translation of some of his verses. After drawing the last water from the well, the salt caravan sets out once again. It's long, oh so long, the Adzalai of salt. composed of many patient dromedaries and a few courageous men. Millions of footsteps, one after another. The interminable line separates, lengthens, and bends, like an advancing python tracing rings in the sand. At sunset, the caravaneers make camp. At dawn, they set off again. The caravan stops only when the burning orb of the sun no longer beats down on the men and their animals. A welcome respite to make camp and rest. But the night is not only a time for resting, it is also a time for prayer. In contrast to the campfires of the Adzalai, these flares burn day and night, illuminating the modern face of the Sahara in the desert oil fields. Oil fields that are spreading and increasing in number. All producing around the clock, not only in North Africa, but also in the Middle East. Worldwide demand for natural gas and petroleum products is growing. And as it grows, so does the need for local manpower. Manpower that is available because the young men of the desert are turning their backs on the harsh life that herding flocks in the desert has to offer. And now, entire tribes can be found camped around the oil fields. In the shadow of the oil wells of Gardai in Algeria, a Bedouin minstrel's repertoire is no longer based on tales of his tribe's courage in epic accounts of battles against worthy enemies. Now, he grins at the thought of being hired by the derrick men and looks forward to living an easier life than his father. When large groups like this turn their back on the desert, absurd situations are created. Even if many nomads no longer wish to be considered as such, in reality they continue to live a nomadic existence. In fact, when a drilling crew has finished its job and moves on to the next site, the Bedouins who have become dependent on the oil men have to pack up camp too, and either move on with them or find work on another site. The employment situation is so haphazard from site to site that it defies all attempts to draw up statistics. How many nomads will no longer be cattle herders at the end of the next season? And how many will become unemployed if the site they work on shuts down? The closing down of a drilling site in the desert obviously has serious consequences for the labor force and the environment. As far as the environment is concerned, there is an inevitable pollution problem. And the problems for the local workers are equally serious because they involve a total transformation in the men's daily routine, traditions, and personal dignity. Many nomads who find themselves unemployed become scavengers. The same phenomenon occurred after World War II. when the North African desert was strewn with military waste. Nowadays, the nomad scavengers work drilling sites that the oil men have abandoned, leaving behind every kind of refuse. In these cases, only specialized manpower moves on. The local labor is fired. For the nomad who is no longer a nomad and has not only lost his old identity but also his new job, the refuse of an abandoned drilling site has a market value that can often replace several days' wages. These scenes were filmed about 50 miles from Hassi Messaoud, the Sahara Desert's most oil-rich area. Much of this refuse can be recycled and will be sold in the marketplaces of the desert oases. If, as in this case, the nearest oasis is too far away to walk, the scavenger nomad resorts to hitchhiking. From Hassi Messaoud to Gardaya, about 120 miles to reach the equivalent of the local flea market. Here, every kind of waste is worth something. And so, once again, a market was our goal. In North Africa, nomads play a key role in many of these markets because of their contribution to the wool trade. The last nomad shepherds gravitate towards the towns where the importance of traditional local crafts is recognized. In some areas, especially in southern Tunisia, nomad shepherds can be found camped with their families outside villages where cloth and carpets are woven. Nomads who have become almost sedentary. On days when the market is not held, they leave their tents at dawn to find part-time employment in the urban area and return home at nightfall. The younger nomads, however, want steady jobs in the workshops where their wool is transformed into consumer items. They too are transformed from independent nomads to salaried employees, slaves of the time clock. In their eyes, we see the shadow of their innate pride, perhaps a little nostalgia for the life they have forsaken. But above all, the memory of poverty that they hope they have turned their backs on forever. The nomad women have no intention of giving up their new lifestyle. Working for a wage is a great social victory for them. In this area, in southern Tunisia, a steady job transforms the newly sedentary nomad into a kind of desert commuter. He goes from his tent to the workshop and back again twice a day. He still lives in the desert and he still belongs to a nomadic tribe, but he is putting down new roots in the modern world. Clinging to the past has become an illusion. Everything around him is changing and changing dramatically, in every desert, in every oasis. For the nomads and those who live in the desert towns, the old people have become the sole keepers of the traditions of an ancient world that had remained virtually unchanged since biblical times. A world that is now being abandoned by its young people who see in the promise of steady employment a way to escape from a life of inherent poverty. Young people who are not concerned that they are renouncing an ethnic identity that is thousands of years old. When When the last surviving nomads pass away, the final page will have been written to one of the oldest chapters in the history of mankind. The story of the desert nomads, disappearing as the desert itself advances and expands.